The History of the Italian Language, Part 1. The Romance Languages. Italian is a Romance language. Now, although some people might say Italian is the language of love, that is not why it is called a Romance language. It is because it comes from the language that the Romans spoke. The Romance languages are descended from Latin, the language of the Romans. The Roman Empire covered a vast area at its peak, and everywhere the Romans went, they took their language, Latin, with them. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, the colloquial Latin that people spoke had become quite different from the Latin of great writers such as Caesar or Cicero from the 1st century BC. People still wrote in classical Latin, but called the everyday language that they spoke the vulgar Roman language, or Romance. The colloquial language that these Roman citizens spoke started to develop regional differences, and these dialects of Romance gradually became recognized as different languages. Here are the largest Romance languages today: Italian, Romanian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. The Romance languages are still very similar, as can be seen from these common words.
Panem,
Pane,
pâine,
pain,
pan,
pain,
vinum,
vino,
vin,
vin,
vino.
vigno.
Here, appearing on the map, are some other Romance languages that you might have heard of. Some of them have thousands of speakers. Others are becoming endangered. The dialects of Italy are really different Romance languages that all developed independently from spoken Latin. Standard Italian comes from the dialect of Tuscany. There are lots of other Romance languages that you might not have heard of. In fact, the Romance languages form a continuum, so if you were to walk from Portugal through Spain and Catalonia into southern France and round into northern Italy, then down to Rome, listening to local people talk, the dialects would change gradually from village to village, even though the national languages are quite different. What about these areas? They were part of the Roman Empire, so why don't people speak Romance languages there? After the Arab conquest of the 7th and 8th centuries, Latin was replaced by Arabic in northern Africa as the language of administration, but the spoken language survived longer. When the Romans conquered Britain in 43 AD, the Celtic people they met spoke British, the ancestor of modern Welsh and Cornish. English didn't arrive until a few hundred years later, when the Germanic Anglo-Saxons invaded. Latin didn't survive as a spoken language in Britain, but many words entered the British language, and Welsh still has a large number of words that derive from Latin. Here are a few examples.
Cella,
cella,
kell, ecclesia,
chiesa,
egluis, pontem,
ponte,
pont,
Barba,
Barba,
barv,
murum,
muro,
mir,
fenestra.
finestra.
fenest.
One Romance language that only died out fairly recently is Dalmatian. It was spoken in Croatia and was similar to both Italian and Romanian. In 1897, Matteo Bartoli from Istria visited the last native speaker, Duone Udaina, and obtained a lot of information from him concerning the vocabulary, grammar and phonology of Dalmatian, as well as some stories in the language. Here is a summary showing how some of the Romance languages that are spoken today relate to each other. Thank you for watching The History of the Italian Language, Part 1. In Part 2, we will look at how Latin evolved in the Italian peninsula and also look at the first written examples of what would become the Italian language.